welcome to our Wolff Industries weekly live stream. Again, I'm Bill Pierce, General Manager and Vice President here at Wolff Industries, and we thank you for tuning in today. When we started this, we really didn't know what to expect. We didn't know if people would want to watch this. We had no idea how far-reaching it would be, but it is quite amazing how small our world has gotten. We've gotten comments, and we have people viewing right now from Australia. We've got Ivan out there in Australia who has asked about this. We've got friends in North Carolina, Tim, Eileen in New York. We've got some friends in the Ukraine watching, and we got some friends in Lynchburg, Virginia watching. Some sharpening apprentices, Pate, Donovan, and Audrey. Welcome. We're glad you're here with us. We've got some exciting stuff today. We've upped our game with even a little bit more tech. We're going to be talking about ride lines. But before we turn everything over to Caleb and Glenn, I wanted to piggyback on the topic I talked about a couple weeks ago with some things we should be doing while we're waiting this out and getting ready to proceed with business. And this is in the area of the SBA loans that have come through. There's been a lot of positive and a lot of negative that I've heard about that. I've seen a lot of discussion on the Sharpeners chats and the online forums about how they were worthless, how some people got them, some people didn't. And so I did some checking on this and dove a little deeper into it. And it seems to me that one of the major things is, in order to be eligible for one of these loans, first of all, you have to be registered as a business. Now, there's pros and cons with that. We all know that with being registered as a business and you get on the radar as a business, there's accountability, liability, and taxes that come with that. And I'm not here to discuss the moral obligations of those things and whether you should sign up and pay the taxes and those things. That's for you and your accountant to work on. But I do know this: if you're not registered as a small business, you aren't eligible to receive any small business loans when things like this come up. Nope, we've never seen anything like this in our lifetime. This is hopefully a one and for all, but I suspect we'll see something like this again. So you'll need to weigh the benefits and the cost analysis of registering your business, getting licensed. With that may come requirements to get liability insurance, bonding, and all of those things. So you'll need to check that. The other part of that is that you have to keep proper records, because even if you were registered as a small business, when it came time to apply for this loan, there were a lot of details and a lot of reports that people had to fill out. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 36 or 38 pieces of information and documentation that were required. That means you're going to have to keep your records up. If you are kind of like I can be at times, and we don't dot our I's and cross our T's very well, when we really need it, that can hurt us. So you probably want to take a look at your accounting methods and keeping up on them, and do you need an accountant or not? But certainly you want to keep those records up to date so you can get a hold of them quickly. And finally is, who are you banking with and what kind of relationship do you have? It seems that the small banks and those that had an advocate for them, they're the ones that came out the best in all of this. If you're banking at a large national bank, which can be very helpful, you become a number. You're not known. At that branch, you need to be known by somebody. And probably in a situation like this, if you're at a smaller bank and there was somebody that you knew that knew who you were, knew your business, how long you've been in it, and all of those things, we're talking about the kind of relationship where this person knows when you have a grandchild, or they know if you have a child graduating. That kind of banker relationship, that certainly helps you in this type of situation. So those are the things that we have found out to be helpful and valuable for those that did apply and did get some of the short-term and SBA loans. So I hope that's helpful for you. We're going to put a screen up here in just a second. We're going to switch our camera angles and views. We're going to turn it over to Caleb and Glenn and start working on ride line on the Ookami honing block and the Shapton Waterstone.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking with us. We're pretty excited today to get going on ride lines. Before we do jump in though, I do want to take a second. I hate that we have to do this 2 weeks in a row, but I do want to extend condolences to Ralph Lee's family in his passing. He was kind of affectionately known as Scissor Man around these parts. He was real big in the Carolinas in our sharpening community. I always remember him coming in here, with his little dog. And so I wanted to thank Jim Turner for putting that on Facebook so that we saw that and we were updated on that situation. And we just wanted to mention that before we got going today. A little housekeeping as we get started. I'm actually going to be jumping back here behind cameras so we wanted to have a switcher to switch between the cameras. That's not going to happen. So I'm actually going to be back behind the cameras unplugging and plugging in every time we want to switch so that we can see what's going on. So it should be fun. But if you see some weirdness going on, lights cutting in and out, I'm gonna be doing my best. But we're real excited about this right here. We've got a camera with a macro lens so that hopefully we can get right up in there on these ride lines and see exactly what Glenn is talking about. I'm real excited to be able to show this and kind of get some microscopic views going on. And in a quick introduction, I'm Caleb. I do sales and marketing here at Wolff Industries. This is Glenn Burke. He is our master trainer and sharpener, and he does all of our training and classes and everything. And so let's get into the good stuff.
All right.
Ride lines.
Ride lines. I have a little outline here that's going to keep me on track. So to try and avoid a lot of rambling, I just want to point out right now that we're going to be focusing on the ride lines, difference between the ride lines between the honing blocks and our whetstone that comes with the Hira-2, the Ookami Gold honing blocks and the Hira-2 whetstone. This isn't intended to be an all-inclusive type of class. This is an introduction to ride lines, okay? But we had a question, what's the difference between the honing blocks and the whetstone, which is better? So this is going to be addressing just an introduction to ride lines. With that in mind, we are going to talk about, we get this in the image.
Slide back up here. I'm going to be on this monitor over here.
All right, a little bit right there. Okay. What is a ride line? If you've done any research online, if you Google ride line, if you Google inside line, you're going to have a lot of guys that are going to be teaching you or calling this particular area of this year maybe by different names. With shears, when I'm teaching a class, I'm going to be talking about an inside edge, the outside edge where you're doing the sharpening, and the cutting edge. So you sharpen the outside edge, hone the inside edge. When the two are just right, when the two are perfect, you're going to have a perfect cutting edge. We're going to be focusing on this hone line, this inside line, the ride line. It's known by several other different nomenclatures, but this inside line that's created, maintained, perfected, restored on the honing blocks and the whetstone. That being said, let's go ahead and let's get a good close-up picture of this inside line for you so you know what we're looking at.
Lay it down. I'm going to try and hit this.
Now I used a colored shear because it most clearly shows this inside line. And I'm going to grab a pen real quick because my finger is not going to be helpful here. Pen, there we go. This shiny silver line is called the inside line, but it also extends all the way into what we call the ride area. this right area, it'll pop back out there. This right area is this area all around your pivot. Okay. Now with this particular thinner solid blade, it's nearly a box that goes all the way around. This ride area and the ride line are technically all on the same plane. Now what I mean by that is if they were laying flat, on this table, what would be touching is the inside line and your ride area. So this area and just this thin line would all be laying flat on the table. There's a very unique feature on thinners. This is the thinning side of the oops, sorry about that. You had it in place. I'm going to put my finger on this end. Hold it still. There's your inside line. Right there. There's your inside line. But the unique feature on thinners, there's your inside line. Do you see that secondary chamfer on the leading edge of the teeth? That secondary chamfer, secondary line, is so that the solid blade, sorry about that, can pass the edge, the leading edge of every tooth, and then make contact with your inside line that's going to provide the cutting. This is why I tell sharpeners, don't sharpen the teeth on the comb. Not unless you know how and just how deep, or you're practiced enough to put that secondary chamfer on there to allow the solid blade to pass. That's your thinner. One of the things that you hear a lot about is washed out tips. This is a beautiful example of a washed out tip. Washed out tip is where your ride line has come all the way around the tip of the shear, the end of the shear, and you no longer have a hollow grind going through the end of the shear. This is going to create a possible snag area. That's where it's going to pinch hair instead of cut it. We want to avoid this. Again, this particular session is on comparing the two. I just want to show you, don't do this. All right, let's go ahead and go to that top-down view. What I've tried to do is create a very basic drawing on what an inside line is and why it's there. This, if we were to cut a shear like this, if I was to cut this shear, and we're going to look at this end of it, okay? So it's going to be, I'm going to get it reflecting out of the light here. If I can. There we go. It's black. We're going to be looking at this end, okay? So this has been drawn out in scale here. This actually represents a blade section that is 3/8 of an inch wide and 130 thousandths deep. All I did is took this blade, took a cross section, and just started reverse engineering. I'll measure it here, measure it here. The interesting thing is, if we take this shear blade and were to set it on a whetstone, the whole surface would touch, and anything on that surface would cause some, if there's anything between these two blades, it's going to cause a problem with their function. So to eliminate all of this contact area, they created a hollow grind. When I say they, it's the manufacturers. And I don't know if anybody has ever gone online to just see the kind of videos that are out there that show the manufacturing processes. There are some that are just fascinating. They show the entire process from raw material to first forging or die cutting or EDM, and then they go to the trimming and the shaping, the welding of a different alloy handle to the blade, EDM, the teeth on a thinner. Then it goes to the drilling. It goes to where they would drill the bumper hole, the pivot hole. They would drill the finger rest hole. Then they would go to the hardening process. Then they start the grinding of the hollow grind and the initial convex, and then they put the initial set in. Then they create the ride line. They finish the convex, and then they do the assembly and the final set. It's a lot of processes. One particular manufacturer says there's over 38 steps in the manufacturing of a shear, and it was very detailed. But what was very interesting is when they created this hollow grind, they're only taking out of the center of this piece of metal about 3/1000ths to 4/1000ths of an inch. And that's the thickness of a sheet of paper. This sheet of paper that's blown around. So they're not taking out very much. What I also found very interesting, particularly on the shear that I measured, is the ride line was at a different plane than the spine. So when I started measuring this, it was actually a full 10/1000ths of an inch. And I'm going to use the word lower just based on a reference of the whetstone or the honing block. The ride line is not on the same plane as the spine. So when this progresses, it shows that your hollow grind goes from the back of your ride area to the back of the spine. Now, we can see that this is creating a very, very thin edge to where this cutting edge would be very, very fragile if we went from the top of the spine straight to the cutting edge, but we don't. We actually have an arc that's been created, and this is our convex. This particular convex is at a 55-degree angle based on our sharpening angles from the Wolff Industries. I believe the Japanese would call this a 35-degree. So you have a much thicker cutting edge, a much stronger cutting edge, especially with this ride line, because your hollow grind doesn't come all the way out to your cutting edge, making it very thin and fragile. It comes to this ride line, making it very strong, removing all the garbage. There's the profile of our shear. And when you set it on the whetstone, it's just like this. Now, what I can't show in this particular 3D setting, or 2D setting, is the third dimension, and that's your ride area. So that your ride area is laying flat. This ride area is actually what creates that flat, sustaining surface against your whetstone. So when it's turned over and set on your whetstone, You want the majority of your pressure right here to keep this blade flat. Now, remember that your blade is not flat, it has set. This set is to allow spring tension from your tension hardware all the way to the tips, so that Dan's throwing his arm up. I'm doing something wrong. This spring tension, so when you open the shear, the tips pass one another or on opposite sides of one another, and then as you close the shear, this tension is transferred all the way down to the tips. If the blades were flat, the further away from your tension area, the weaker this would get. This set has to be compensated for when you're on a flat surface. When you're on a flat surface, like this, your ride area is touching and the tip of the shear is touching. Now, obviously, this is greatly exaggerated because, again, we're talking about maybe 6/1000ths of an inch set on one blade, or it's going to be a little bit more because you can typically slide a business card in between there. So you're probably looking about a 10/1000ths gap, but you still have to push it out so that your ride line is created through the center of the blade here and not just here and the tip. Now, is there a pressure difference between cast and forged? Cast being typically a harder shear, forged. And so I went to a scale and put my whetstone on there, put the scale on, or put the shear on the scale, and using a light box to see when it actually made contact. I had this forged 6-inch shear, and I had a little 5-inch cast shear. And I was really surprised. It took the same amount of force for both blades to touch to the whetstone. And that was about 8 pounds of pressure. I don't know of anybody that can consistently push down, and I'm going to move this over here in the center, and keep a consistent 8 pounds. So there's a secondary way of making sure you're getting proper tension on, or proper seating on your whetstone. And we're going to come to that and show you that in a little bit. First, we're going to go to the Ookami blocks. Again, short shears, long shears, you are going to have the same amount of pressure, believe it or not. It's the difference is very, very little. Now, granted, I just did an X of 2, one long forged shear and one 5-inch cast shear, and it was really close to the exact same poundage. I believe in our manuals it talks about 10 to 12 pounds of pressure. Again, we'll see on the whetstone, show you how to tell whether or not you've got a good ride line going on the blade. The Ookami blocks. We had somebody questioning about do they give as good of ride line as a whetstone? Are they needed for doing curved shears? Are they needed because of set? When these, I wish I could have been around when Lee Wolff was coming up with this idea. This is absolutely brilliant. Even with a long shear, if I have a 5-inch shear or a 7-inch grooming shear, you can still do them on the Ookami Gold honing blocks. One block is 4,000 grit for taking the burr off. The process would be sharpen. You would have a burr, and you would lay the shear at about a 2-degree angle. Why at a 2-degree angle? And I'm talking about the cutting edge at a 2-degree angle from perpendicularity. Is this good and centered on the top view? Okay. All right. Let me turn this. If we were to lay the shear like this, obviously you can see it's rocking on the arc of the block. But as you turn it, the tip now starts making contact with the block at about a 1 or 2 degree angle. And if we take, do I have my exaggeration stick? There it is. Excuse me, step off camera a little bit. If it's rocking like this, as I turn it, now it's going to be making more contact and I can't rock it. So I hope that makes sense to you. The set is going to start to engage, the set of the blade is going to start to engage the block about 1 or 2 degrees. So at this angle, the first step you're going to do is remove the burr. About 4 passes. I check to make sure that the burr is removed. Now I'm going to reestablish the ride line. With fresh paper, you're going to be able to hear and feel. It's going to get quieter and it's going to feel smoother. So it's not necessarily a number of passes. If this is a soft shear, it's going to go quicker. If it's a real hard shear, like something that's has a little more titanium in it, I'm going to make sure I get my ride area, my cutting edge, and this is going to be 4,000 grit initial edge. And Dan is going to show some pictures. Let me get finished with this, because on the finished side, this is 8,000 grit, and all I'm doing is polishing what I started on the deburr. Dan, if you got those pictures. As you can see, the example is a factory edge compared to what you would get off the honing blocks. Very clean, very, very good inside line from these blocks. I've heard guys say, they'll get girls say, well, the shear is crunching, or it's loud when I use it. It cuts great, but it's loud. You haven't spent enough time on your paper, or your paper needs replaced. This is going to give you a better inside line with fresh paper, and clean your paper. This is, as you can tell here, the you call it swar for the loading on your paper, the patina, as it's building up in the grit. To clean that, you can use soap and water. I particularly, because I was sharpened in the north, my soap and water would freeze, so I just used plain old rubbing alcohol. You get it at the store, screwed a squirt top to it, and I just used alcohol to clean these off, and it did a great job. Don't go cheap, okay? If you're having to spend 20 or 30 passes trying to get a good inside line on these shears, just replace the paper, all right? It's going to save you more time, and the saving time is going to save you money. But those pictures that he was showing you online is going to, or on the screen, are what you would get from the honing blocks. Next is a whetstone. The whetstone has a, on the Ookami Gold honing blocks, now forgive me for going back, on these Ookami Gold honing blocks, If you have your Ookami manual, you'll find the instructions on pages 9, 10, and 11 for using these. For the Hiritu Whetstone, I believe that is going to be on pages 15 and 16. There's nothing that I'm not going to show you here that's not in the manual, or the manual has everything that I'm going to show you. So we aren't going to have those pages come up. As you can see, I've left this stone dirty. Okay. I want this stone perfectly clean, but I also want it perfectly flat. When I was a mobile sharpener and just learning, I was experimenting with a natural whetstone, and I foolishly didn't ask for advice. I was using it on a regular basis, and I went to a particular salon I'd been trying to get into for couple years. They finally let me in there to sharpen their shears. Unfortunately, the night before I went, it froze, and I kept my whetstone in a water bath. When I got in the morning, I put it in the water bath. What I didn't know is that my stone froze that night. And when it froze, the ends swelled up. Now, you couldn't see it. You couldn't even feel it. But there was enough of a difference that when I started to use it the next day, it had a trough in it. And what I did is I created a negative radius on my inside line, and every single pair of shears that I sharpened folded hair. And I didn't know why. It worked great the day before, but I didn't know why it failed then. And I shut that salon down, and they weren't too happy, as you can imagine. But I also didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what I'd done wrong because it worked the day before. This was about a week before 9/11. And when 9/11 took place, I was seriously thinking about finding a different job because I was still very upset that I had shut this salon down and I didn't know what I'd done wrong. When 9/11 took place, all the airplanes came, they were forced to land, and Bonnie McGowan happened to land where I was living. She gave me a call. She came out, had supper with the family, and I shared my story with her. And she says, well, let me see your whetstone. And she had a flattener with her. And she took my whetstone to the sink, and sure enough, there was a trough that probably took a good 15, 20 minutes to get worked out. Keep your whetstone flat. Do not take any shortcuts. Do not take any chances. You need to keep this flat. So what I started doing is I started using my flattener to clean my stone. My stones don't last as long, but I don't have any complaints either. And I'm not shutting down any salons. So I'm using my flattener to clean my stone. Now, I had the blade that I was using on the Ookami Gold, and that's this one. And this one see, I made a mistake. There we go. I did this one on the Ookami Gold holding blocks. I'm going to do this one on my whetstone. Now, it's clean. White, the way I want it. Again, the scenario is if I've come straight from the sharpening, I've got a burr on the inside of this shear. Okay? I'm going to start with the burr off the block, taking my right area flat, and I'm going to pull that burr off on the leading edge of my whetstone. Now that my blade is on the stone, I can add the rest of the pressure. And I'm going to pull back. Now, can you see the faint gray? There we go. You can see the faint gray extension of contact from the tip, all this gray to my right area, all this area through here. From where I started adding pressure all the way back. This stone is telling me whether or not I'm making good contact on with my ride line. I'm going to add a little bit more water. I'm going to push forward. And again, if you can tell whether or not you're putting 8 to 12 pounds of pressure, good on you. I can't. I'm watching the stone. So I'm going to work this inside line until it feels smooth. Come to a complete stop. Roll the spine. Now I'm going to clean it off. The process that we teach with the Ookami Gold sharpening system and with the Hero 2 sharpening system is that after you sharpen, you work your inside line. After your inside line, you go and polish. The reason for that is your sharpening is going to create an inside burr. Your honing is going to create a small outside burr. Then you're going to polish. That's going to create a small polishing burr on the inside. Then you're going to assemble and cut that burr off. That's why we teach sharpen, inside line, and polish. But this, you want to change those views over again. Clean this off again. See if I can't get this reflected. That's a pretty inside line. We're going to get it showing on this. There we go. And this is the 6,000. Had a gentleman call, had a sharpener call the other day. If they needed to go to an 8,000 or a 10,000 or 12 or 20. You know, the reason we sell the 6,000, we'll go to top view again. The reason we sell the 6,000 is it removes material quickly and it leaves a good enough edge or a smooth enough inside line for the function. Can you go to an 8,000? Absolutely. Can you, sorry about that, jumping back and forth. Can you go to a 10,000? Absolutely. I remember when I was first getting started, there was this conversation about the finer the better. So there was a man that found a 32,000 grit Whetstone, and he was working his shears on that and getting lots of complaints. The surfaces were so smooth that when they were closing, the cutting edges, the inside lines were actually sticking to one another because they were so perfectly matched, so perfectly smooth. The 6, you're not going to be able to feel a difference between a 6 and an 8. You'll be able to see a difference. You'll feel a difference between a 4 and a 6. You'll feel a difference between a 4 and an 8. But if you want to, if you, in your mind or obviously through somebody else, think that you're going to need an 8 or a 10 or a 12, 15,000 to polish that edge, go right ahead. It's you're not going to be hurting anything. but the 6 is going to remove the damage quickly, and it is going to leave an edge on there that is extremely functional. And when you use that 6, it's going to be the fastest working for you. Any questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in here. I apologize that I did not mention before that we were going to go through the whole kind of process and then address the questions at the end. So I apologize I didn't say that. Thank you to Bill for jumping in and putting that in there. So the first thing is we got the chamfer you talked about on the thinning shears. Is that also considered the ramp?
Yes.
Could you explain the ramp on a thinner
You could
blade?
call that the ramp. Again, different trainers, different sharpeners are going to call it different things. But just know that you've got a ride area, and when that solid blade comes to that tooth, you've got to have something that's going to allow it past the edge. And so whether it's just a little bit, I call it a chamfer just because in a drawing or in machining, that's what you cut in, is a chamfer on it. If you want to call it a ramp, that's what it looks like. So either way, you're going to get the job done.
Okay, there we go. We're going to drop in here, and Charles made the comment. Charles Miller made the comment that it's really hard to, or nearly impossible to, keep it at 8 pounds of pressure uniformly, and so that's why you brought in making sure you're looking at the stone here.
Exactly.
Yeah, that you're seeing it completely smooth all the way across. So we addressed that. I'm going to keep jumping down here. Tim asked if you worked the ride line before sharpening, but we talked about that.
You can. If there's damage on the shear, and I'll see this with dog grooming shears, they'll have some pretty deep damage where you've got a nick in that blade and they just keep on using it, and it drives that damage deep into the ride line. So with a curved shear, we suggest using the pink hone, white hone, work that inside line, get that damage out, so that when you're cutting a final burr off on one blade, you're not reintroducing damage. But absolutely, you can run your shear on your whetstone. But again, the process that I would encourage you to keep is, if you start with the whetstone, you're still going to sharpen, just go back to your whetstone, go to your polishing, assemble, and cut the burr off. So if you want to start with the whetstone, great, but make sure you put the whetstone back in the process where it belongs.
Okay. Another question that we asked about was, please explain washed out tips, and we showed that real close what the washed out tips look like.
Yes.
What is a way to avoid the washed out tips, and what can we do to maybe fix that?
Okay. Washed out tips come in a couple of different reasons. One, the shear is just so old it needs replaced. You've sharpened the life of that shear so much that let's see, here's a nice example. You can see where a lot of this material has been removed, okay, and I'm starting to sharpen down into the hollow grind. Well, it's not just here. Can you see that okay?
Let's move that.
Sorry about that.
The light's reflecting.
Can you zoom in on that, Dan?
Let's see if we can crop that in.
There we go.
There a little bit.
All right. If you can see, there's a lot of material that's been removed from this shear. And you're starting to sharpen down into the hollow grind, and it's the entire blade length. So if you're sharpening into the hollow grind here, you're sharpening into the hollow grind at the tip. Eventually, you're going to sharpen down through the hollow grind of the tip because you've sharpened so far into the hollow grind here. There are advanced techniques that are taught. I'll just leave it at that. There are advanced techniques that will help you extend the life of that shear. The cast shear, you're just going to have to remove this. There's other things to do, so without taking an advanced hands-on, you're going to have to remove that part of the shear that's washed out so that the hollow grind passes all the way through. Forged shears, you have a little bit more options available to you. Twist, a little extra set. Again, there's one other particular advanced technique that you can use to extend the life of that shear after the tip's been washed out. To prevent it, just on a foolish mistake side, is preventing putting too much pressure out here at the tip when you're working your inside line. Stay away from it. You've already got the max amount of pressure just by taking that set out. You know, your tip is going to be your tip and your ride area are going to be where the max amount of pressure is. So avoid getting a finger out here. Okay? Keep most of your pressure right here in the center of your set, and that will help prevent washing out the tip. But spending too much time, if you have to use like 1,000 grit to get a lot of damage removed, or say you're trying to get the entry inside line reestablished and you're trying to take some heavy material out of the ride area, be very careful that you're not taking it out of the tip also. You will wash that out. It just depends on the situation. Obviously, if you've got a 5-inch shear or a 4.5-inch shear, you don't want to be taking a lot off the tip, but that may be your own option.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say, if you've got another question or two, go ahead and drop them in there. I think there's about a 60-second delay, so I'm going to ask him another question here, and hopefully in that time, if you've got one or two you want to throw in there real quick, but if not, we will start to wrap it up here soon after. Tim, I believe, is in North Carolina, and he asked, what about the ride on a curve shear? Can you address that quickly here?
Let me grab a curve shear and show you how we do that. That is a good question, Tim.
He's going to grab a curve shear. I don't know if you heard him. I wasn't sure which microphone we've got on here. But he's going to grab a curve shear and kind of try to show that real quick.
We sell pink hones and white hone. This is a very long dog grooming shear. I've actually been doing some special sharpening on it. I don't know if you can see those waves or not. What I did was I just cut 55, 50, 45, 40, 35 on down to 0 so that a sharpener can see, compare scratch tests. But to answer your question, Tim, we will take the pink hone or a white hone, honing stick, lay it flat on your inside right on your ride area, and take it down your ride line this way. Now, if we can go to the wide view, this is how I like to hold it for a little stability. I'll hold my stick still, okay, and I will pull the blade out this way.
So that it's supported by your finger here.
My finger, it's going to help prevent me from rolling over the edge.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm holding this as solid and as steady as possible. And so when I'm honing an inside line of a curve shear, now this curve is actually the easiest to do. The one where you want the most stability is where it's curving the opposite direction, where you're having to do it this way, down, out, and away.
All right, I'm going to see if any more questions have come through here. We got some people jumping in just saying thank you. Thanks for sharing the tips. I believe that has us for this week.
Great.
We appreciate you guys joining us. We actually don't have a topic for next week to announce, to tell you what we're doing next week. So leave a comment and let us know something you'd like to see. If we pick your topic for next week, I will contact you and we'll get you a gift card. But as of right now, I don't have one to announce. So keep an eye on our Facebook page, on social media, and I will, at some point early next week, we'll let you know what we're going to work on so that you can prepare for that. But we will be here next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern. I believe that is maybe 6 in the evening for our UK friends. But yeah, same time, same place. We'll see you later. Thanks.